In a month, Julia Gillard will deliver her first budget as Prime Minister. Tonight, in a speech for the Sydney Institute, she's laying down some guidelines for how she'll be framing that budget. The event's at Luna Park, and Chris Uhlmann joins me from there. Now, Chris, the government keeps saying it's going to be a tough budget. Will the Prime Minister tonight be explaining why and in what way?
Yes, she will be, Lee, and also she'll be outlining and giving us some analysis of where she thinks the economy is now. And it expands a little bit on something the Treasurer said recently, which is if you're going to be Keynesians on the way down, then you have to be Keynesians on the way up. And what that means is that when the private sector is in retreat, the government should step forward, and when it advances, the government should step back. Otherwise, you have too many private sector dollars and government dollars in the economy together, chasing the same scarce resources, and that pushes up inflation. And you might recall that was the criticism of the Howard government back in 2006 and 2007, and that forced the hand of the Reserve Bank to push up interest rates. This government has been criticised about the fact that the timetable it's got for returning the budget to surplus in just 2 years' time is a political timetable. Well, the Prime Minister will make the argument that it's also an economic timetable now, that they need to manage the greatest mining boom since the 1850s, and that means making hard decisions now, or otherwise you'll have to make harder decisions later. And also there's a difficult story to tell about this economy and this budget. The budget in particular is that revenue is going to be soft in the short term, but in the long term there'll be this surge of money from the mining boom. So the government has a bit of a tricky story to tell. The Prime Minister is going to tell part of it this week, and the Treasurer will tell the next part the next week.
Chris, there's been a lot of talk about the government trying to make savings on disability pensions. Is the Prime Minister going to be talking any more about that this evening?
Yeah, she's going to go further, I think, and talk a little bit more about long-term unemployment, even though we've got 4.9% unemployment at the moment, which is very low by historic standards. 230,000 people have been out of work for 2 years. There are 250,000 families where no one has worked for more than a year, and youth unemployment is particularly high in some parts of the economy. Now, she's made the point before that Australia needs workers and that some Australians are out of work, and that the Labor Party is the party of work and not of welfare. So she's going to talk a bit more about participation in the workforce. That's a hard nut to crack. I don't know that she's going to offer any of the government's solutions tonight, but certainly pointing again that that's one of the areas that they will be attacking in this budget.
Chris, very briefly, there are always losers in a tough budget. It's going to be a hard sell, isn't it?
It certainly is, and think about how many fights there are going on at the moment. There's fights over the carbon tax, there's fights with the clubs, there's fights going on now with the military, and some people who are beginning to get word that their budgets are going to be tight are beginning to fight with the government already. I don't think this government needs too many more fights, but there are some on the way, Lee.
Chris Uhlmann, thank you. We'll talk tomorrow, no doubt.